These past few weeks have been quite a trip. My favorite meme from this time of our lives has been one that I read that went past generations have been called to foreign lands to fight wars. Our generation has been called to stay at home and watch Netflix. We can do this. Yes, we can, and yes, we have, and yes, we shall. But it has been difficult, and that's our reason for talking together today. But first, let's pause. And speaking for us all, our hearts absolutely go out for those families that have been brutally hit by this virus. To those who have lost their lives, to those who have suffered the illness but have struggled their way through it, and for those families who have lost those they loved so dearly. And we feel empathy for those who have lost their jobs, who may be living from paycheck to paycheck and don't know how they're going to make it. And our deepest appreciation for those who literally put themselves in harm's way to make a difference in the lives of those who are ill. But in our time together today, we're going to focus on two issues. The struggle, the emotional struggle of this COVID era, and secondly, how we best engage the challenge. The biblical umbrella over all that I have to say are the words of the risen Christ. And remember, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. I am with you always. In every moment, for every person, in every challenge, be it personal, relational, medical, we are never beyond the reach of God's grace. With that in mind, let's look at the struggle of this new era. What challenges has it brought? Front and center, stress and anxiety. Especially early on, just weeks ago, the stress and anxiety was absolutely at the ceiling. This new threat was new, it was different, it was invisible. The anxiety was not only understandable, it was absolutely inevitable. But even when it's not a pandemic, stress comes with change, and our lives were radically changed. Center stage of the threat was, of course, what we continued hearing was this life-threatening, invisible enemy. People who are looking and feeling healthy can still carry it. You've got to be on your toes, we heard. Don't let your guard down, it's important. And so stress is the result. And then for many, the stress of job losses, of financial setbacks, etc. And now stress, as we all know, it's a good thing. It's the God-given fight, flight, or freeze response anytime there's a danger. It's what the caveman and cavewoman felt when a tiger appeared. The problem is that these tigers can be everywhere, and they're invisible. You can't walk into your local Publix without feeling it. The anxiety. Though the masks cover people's faces, you can see it in their eyes. You get to the end of the aisle, you make a turn, they see you, and immediately they move 6 feet away, and rightly so. God gave us the stress reaction so we would be alert, so we would be attentive. Jesus said, "Be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove," meaning be wise and always with good intention. Be wise, be alert, be attentive. Stress reminds us to do so. Another cause of the stress is that this pandemic crisis has caused us to shift who we fundamentally are. I have occasionally spoken the words, If you know who you are, you'll know what to do. Well, I know who I am, and currently I'm told not to do that. We all want to be in relationship. We want to be close to those who matter to us. We want to be in a hugging, talking, laughing, crying, drinking coffee together relationship. And we can't. We're having to contradict our core instincts. Taking a walk with the little children, parents are having to say things like, stay close to me, don't talk to those people, do not play with those children. 180 degrees away from what their heart is wanting to say and what they would love to tell their children. Did you see the video of the physician father who came home from the hospital one evening? His wife was filming his arrival. He walks in the front door. I know you saw it. He walked in the front door, and his little shaver, about 3 years old, his little boy, goes running up to him. And he bends down, just instinctively, he bends down to hug his son. And immediately he realizes it. And he says, stop. And the little boy, we're seeing the little boy from the back, but the little boy froze. And you can tell from his body language several things. Number one is he was shocked. Another one is he was a little frightened. And the other was he was totally confused. And as his father knelt down several feet before him, as he squatted down, as I recall, his head went into his hand and you could feel the angst that he was feeling. He knew everything he wanted to do. He wanted to hug and embrace and lift that little shaver and be welcomed home. Stress. This new era forces us to be something other than who we are. We know who we are, and yet our wisdom, our common sense, and the CDC says don't do that. That causes stress. Then there's another big source of stress. It's being relatively out of control, which brings us to the topic of toilet paper. What was up with the toilet paper? Control, as in being out of control. By the way, it's been different in different nations. The hoarding and the stockpiling has been. In China, it was homeopathic products that they hoarded and stockpiled. In other countries, it was zinc lozenges. And in our country, it was toilet paper. Now, toilet paper actually began in Australia, but we borrowed the idea and then we absolutely ran with it. Well, okay, let's start with the basics. We all need toilet paper. But why the panic? Why the stockpiling of it? In the field of psychology, the blogs and the podcast immediately exploded. We were feeling so helpless in the face of this worldwide pandemic, so out of control, that we were desperate to control anything we could, and we were going to need things like toilet paper. Then because of panic buying, something called scarcity mentality kicked in, and the buying then escalated. Generally, we despise being out of control. And this time, the issue over which we were out of control was even life-threatening. Dr. Fauci said, you don't make the timeline. The virus makes the timeline. Oh my gosh. I'm out of control. What am I going to do? I've got to do something. I'm going to need toilet paper. Is it irrational? Of course it is. But is there a rationale behind it? Of course there is. It's stress of being out of control. And then there's loneliness. With the stay-in-place directives, increasingly, it brings loneliness. As neuroscientists put it, we are wired for relationships. Our loneliness is telling us we're longing for something that we need. I think of different relationships as being different relational food groups. I have so many wonderful relationships in my life. Front and center is my wife, Karen. And then there are our kids and our grandkids and my dear friends here at the church and my dear friends from other places in my life and my extended family, and it goes on. Each of these different relationships are what I think of as different food groups. And by each of these relationships, I am nurtured and emotionally nourished differently. And during this era of our lives, we are cut off from virtually, in face-to-face ways, we're cut off from virtually all of these relationships that matter so much to us. And we long for the emotional, nutritional balance of all the food groups. We are away from so many. Now, you may well be in relationship under that shelter with the most important relationship in your life. Thank goodness for that. But you're missing the nutrition of all the others. The healthy, though uncomfortable response is loneliness. Loneliness is a positive emotion. It's the emotion that pulls us back into the relationships we need, just like hunger is a positive emotion that pulls us to the foods that we need. Loneliness draws us back to the relationships we need. And then we hear, shelter in place. Stay at home. And the loneliness builds. And then there's grief. Grief is the emotional response to loss. And the losses we have experienced have been many. The loss of the world we knew. This one is so different. And we don't know when this crisis passes how much of the differences will remain. The loss of personal touch, the hugs, the embraces, even the handshakes. The loss of gathering on Sunday morning with those who are so special to us. Of meeting with friends for coffee in the morning, dinner in the evening. The loss of the freedom to come and go. And many experienced during this time a feeling of low-level depression, not major depression, not clinical depression. Not that at all, but a dullness, a flat affect, no enthusiasm, a lack of energy, of inspiration. And then for many of us who are often older and have no children any longer under the roof, there is boredom. I taught my Sunday school class many of these same lessons a couple of weeks ago, and I semi-playfully told them, okay, now this part about boredom, this is just among us, okay? We're going to keep this on the down low because most of us are empty nesters. We have children, adult children. They have children. Some of them have 2. Some have 3. Maybe 3 under the age of 6. 3 children under the age of 6, no school, no playgrounds, at home, all day. They would give anything to be bored. But boredom may be a first world empty nester problem, but it is a problem. And then there are the lives that our children, our adult children, are leading, which has far greater demands. These are the ones who would love to be bored. Those who are parents and now teachers 24/7. They had all they could say grace over before this corona era, and now they're having to work from home, keep their family safe, watch their children all day, every day, and as if they needed another job, they now are their children's teachers. The burden can be incredible. And then for many, there is emotional fatigue. The adrenaline is over and fatigue has set in, and there is impatience and there is irritation, and the list goes on and on. So, this is our new reality. What do we do with it? How do we best address the challenges that are before us? Robert Louis Stevenson said, "Life is not a matter of holding good cards, but of playing a poor hand well." Well, we don't like this hand we've been dealt. We didn't ask for it, we didn't want it, but we've got it. Some people, we are keenly aware. Some people have it far, far worse than we do, but many of us are holding a difficult hand. How do we best play it? We know there are no simple answers, but there is guidance to be offered. How do we best engage this Corona era? We begin with the affirmation of the Scriptures, which sets the tone for what we do. Paul wrote, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." Now be careful not to trivialize this passage and make it into some kind of grandiose Superman. I can leap tall buildings with a single bound. I can do all things. Not what Paul meant. That would ignore the personal context in which it's written. Here are the words that precede it. Listen carefully. And you will hear that Paul is speaking from the heart and not from the ego. I have learned to be content in whatever I have. I know what it is to have little, and I know what it is to have plenty. In any and all circumstances, I have learned the secret of being well fed and of going hungry, of having plenty and being in need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. In the language of our day, through Christ, we've got this. In whatever era we live, in whatever challenge we have, in Christ, we have this. That is our faith. That is our belief in all that we do. So let's press on. Next. Connect in every way you can, especially for those who are struggling with loneliness. To the degree that you can and in the ways that you can, enjoy the company of those you love. Social distance is the phrase that someone used, and then everyone has repeated it since then. No, 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 no. It's not social distance. It's physical distance. We need to be as socially, relationally, as connected as we can possibly be. Find your best ways of reaching out. Find your best ways of connecting. Gather your best buds. Connect and stay connected. I heard someone refer to her gathering of her best friends as her Corona crew. Connect and stay connected. Next, in dealing with stress and anxiety, deal with it intentionally. Don't just put on your big boy and big girl britches and ride it out. Have an intentional game plan of how you're going to deal with stress and anxiety if you're feeling it significantly. From the second epistle of Timothy, rekindle the gift of God that is within you. For God did not give us a spirit of cowardice, but rather a spirit of power and of love and of self-discipline. Wow. What are we going to do with this powerful directive? We're going to be intentional. Be intentional in how you deal with your stress and anxiety. Of course, everyone is unique, and you know you like nobody else ever can. You know how best you deal with stress. You know how best you deal with your own anxiety. But there are principles that are true for us all. Let me share briefly 5 of them with you. First, separate the facts from the feelings. You feel anxious. Of course you do. But before you run with it, is it based on a fact or is it based on a feeling? Just a feeling. Look at what has you worried. Is it a probability or a possibility or a remote chance, or is it just a feeling of fear? Be accurate about the level of danger and let that guide you before you let that anxiety snowball. What I'm encouraging you to do is to bring balance between the amygdala in your brain, that raw emotional part of your brain, and the rational prefrontal cortex, to keep those in balance, to keep those in conversation. Don't be feeling stress at a level that is beyond the literal threat. Sometimes Roosevelt's quote is true: the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And sometimes there really is something to fear. Before your anxiety builds, we would do well to see if our anxiety is really founded on reality or fear itself. Second, then feel what you feel. Feel all that you feel. Get in touch with it all. Now, I know what you're thinking right now. Oh, Ron really knows how to have a good time. Well, I grew up with the unspoken motto, if you feel it, fake it. It does not serve us well. Bring it on. Feel it all. Remembering that you can't heal what you don't feel. And then, having gotten in touch with it, third, give it a voice. Lift each concern first to God in prayer. And then, as I said in a sermon here a couple of months ago, give it a voice. Talk it out, cry it out, or write it out. As I've said to countless people who have struggled, often with a grief, often dealing with their losses, but give it a voice. Whatever voice is most effective of those 3, and in this situation, I'm a big fan of talking it out. If you're struggling, do not go through this alone. Stay connected. Stay in relationship. Go to your go-to person. And by the way, they will likely need you as much as you need them. And in this corona stay in place, shelter in place era, it's also a good thing to write it out as well. Take that time that you are alone to begin journaling. Pour out your heart, page after page. Write it and shred it if you like. The sheer experience of writing it, of pouring out that passion onto a page, can be both relieving and even inspiring. Okay. This is the principle behind why it's so important. Anytime anything happens to any of us, we are infused with emotional input. We are therefore thrown off balance. We are listing with the emotional input. How do we get our ship righted again? How do we get back into equilibrium from the input? Is with output. Talk it out. Cry it out. Write it out. Balance the input with output. And then, again, in dealing with the stress and anxiety, number 4, respond to that awful feeling of being out of control by directing your attention to everything within your control. Buy more toilet paper. No. It's a joke. It's a joke. By definition, focusing on what is beyond our control is a waste of time and a great generator of anxiety. Turning your attention to what you can control gives you a sense of agency, of genuine empowerment, and reduces anxiety. Now, we know the drill of what we can control. We're good students of CDC's guidelines. Within reason, which does not involve toilet paper, within reason, do everything you can do that is within your control. And then, number 5, set boundaries. I once heard the quote, the difference between a river and a swamp is the river has boundaries. The difference between what keeps life stagnant and keeps it flowing are boundaries. Put up boundaries. Put up guardrails. Find your ways to intentionally turn it off. If being too keyed up is a problem for you, begin here. Each day, take in the information that you need to get from the news to stay informed, and then shut it off. It did nothing good for those who would watch time after time after time the World Trade Centers crash almost 20 years ago. And it does us no good to watch a constant stream of the minutia about COVID-19 cases and deaths and projections. Set your boundaries. Set your boundaries. Shut it off and begin to relax. Intentionally relax. Take in a deep breath. Pause. Let it out. Breathe in. Pause. Exhale. Again and again. Relax. It is not coincidental that the passage of Scripture that most defines how we get to know God begins with the phrase, be still. Be still and know that I am God. Get the news you need, then turn it off, shut it down, let it go, and move on to something you enjoy. Now, this is true for all of us, whether anxiety and stress are a primary concern of yours or not. Move on to what you enjoy, whatever that is for you, whatever gives you life and energy, whatever feeds your heart and soul. Read that book, call that friend, watch a great movie. Reach up at the top of the closet on that shelf in the back and pull out some of those board games. Dust them off, clear the kitchen table, and have a ball. Go out for a walk. I was in my neighborhood the other day and I made this turn, and in this turn there's a long stretch, about 2 blocks. And I looked down that stretch and lo and behold, here were 4 different families, well spaced apart and all that. Here were 4 different families. And you could see, and from some of the squeals you could hear, they were having a ball. They were having a marvelous time. Do the things that you enjoy. And now for those who are riding out this time at home alone, stay as connected as you can in all the ways that you can. But I want to share one other thought. I have a friend who lost her husband decades ago, and she lives as a single woman a very vibrant, joyful life. And one time I asked her about it, how she did that. And what she said were several different things, but there was one thing that she said that has stayed with me, and I have remembered. She said, I have learned to enjoy the pleasure of my own company. Such wisdom and such guidance. Oh, and when it comes to enjoying life, be sure to laugh. If it's not something that is there naturally, find a way to get some funny into your day. Laughter lowers the stress hormone cortisol, and it raises the endorphins. It is absolutely a win-win. Then, next, add something purposeful to your day. Decide to do some things that give you purpose in this unique chapter of your life. Use this time you have to do something worthwhile. It doesn't have to be big. I know someone who is finally going through those old family photos she had been wanting to organize. I know someone else who is vetting different agencies to see where he might want to volunteer in the near future. Another friend is making sandwiches multiple times a week for some people who are lining up for food because they're hungry. And yet another, and remember, I said it doesn't have to be something big, but it can be. Another has finished her novel that she has written during this shelter-in-place time at home. But do something purposeful. Now, one of the side effects is it will distract you from any angst that you may be feeling, but the point is to turn to what gives you life and purpose and meaning in this unique chapter. Oh, by the way, I thought of another friend. She intentionally calls each day someone she knows who is sheltering in place at home alone. So she knows they will talk with at least one other person that day. Do something purposeful. Someone said on Facebook, I have always wanted to do a deep cleaning of my house, but I couldn't because I never had the time. Now I realize there must have been some other reason. So it may not be a deep cleaning that you do, but make it something purposeful, something meaningful for which perhaps you never had the time. Next, do the fundamentals. Get the basics right, and everything else will be easier. Eat well, sleep well, exercise well, pray well, stay well connected with those who matter to you. Now, it may be that some of those will be more challenging than others. I heard someone say, social distancing, I need social distancing from my refrigerator. It may be that eat well could be more of a challenge, but do the basics. Eat well, sleep well, exercise well, pray well, stay well connected with those who matter the most. Remember the basics. Next, make this a spiritual time. Know God's grace while sheltering in place. I know many of you are already doing this, of setting aside a time for quiet, prayerful meditation. Carve out those windows of time if you're not. Putting anything distracting aside, shutting down all the mental chatter that keeps going on. And listen for the still, small voice of God's own Spirit. And finally, begin considering what you're going to take with you. Many have mentioned the silver linings of staying in place. And one of those is we have the time to reflect and to consider how we will come out of it the stronger and the wiser for having been here. I've heard several times people say the world is never going back to the way it was. And if it doesn't, then if it is going to be different, then let's make it better. If our lives are going to be different, let's make them better. What will we take with us to make our lives the richer for having been here? I think of it in two different ways. What have we done and what have we missed? What have we done that we want to keep on doing? And what have we missed that we will never take for granted again? What have we done? What have we done far more often, or for the first time ever, or for the first time in a long, long time? What have we done that adds to our lives what we want to continue and to make permanent? Perhaps it's that quiet time, or perhaps special family time together, or time to create, or to paint, or write, or garden. Time away from schedules, from calendars, time to have the freedom to relax, to read, to renew. What have we done that we want to take with us? Log it. Remember it. I do so hope that a year from now, when I am taking a walk around my neighborhood, I make that turn and I look at that long stretch, and a year from now I see those 4 families. I so hope they logged it. They logged that laughter and that joy they experienced together, and they remember to take it with them. And what have we missed? What have we had to do without during these weeks, and have come to know that it is perhaps even more important to us than we realized? I know of one little boy who actually said to his mother, "Mom, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I miss school." What have we missed? I bet it begins with relationships and goes from there. Whatever you have missed, log it. And when you're back, embrace it. It's time for us to close. Many of you know that my wife Karen has had to deal with cancer over the last several years. You may have heard me say when asked how Karen is doing that she is as courageous and positive as ever. Courageous and positive. It's what I've come to think of as her spunk and spirit. And that's what we all need right now. Spunk and spirit. Spunk, the tenacity to confidently engage any challenge life brings. And spirit, to know with optimism that we can meet those challenges through Christ who strengthens us. Through Christ, with spunk and spirit, we've got this.